Hi everybody, welcome to part 2 of this short video tutorial series. In the first video, we got as far as designing a game panel and, a game frame. So a frame is the thing with all the buttons, and I could probably put a title up here, and that's the frame. And inside the frame, we put panels. And I'm just using one panel. I gave it a black background, and I gave it a dimension of 400 pixels by 400 pixels. And here it is. Okay, do you remember we set resizable to be false? I cannot change the size of this panel, etc., etc., etc. So we're currently designing, let's just close this. We are currently designing our game panel. And in our game, we're going to have two Mario objects, and we're going to be using a thread to help us control the game. That's really the purpose of this thread. And as I said in the first video, if we want to use a thread, we need to implement the runnable class. And if we want to implement the runnable class, it forces us, kind of like we create a contract with it to implement the run method. We'll be looking at that in this video. When we construct a game panel, so we set up our panel, and we initialize our two characters, and then I'm going to call a method called start game. Again, this is just purely my own creative imagination. So let's start to create this game. It's not a static method. No. We cannot call the start game method. We cannot call this method without having a game panel object. Okay, so it's not static. We can only call it if we have a game panel object. Okay, so let's have a look at this method. When we start a game, what do we need to do? We need to initialize our game thread. I guess we could have done it in the constructor. Would it matter? Let's initialize this game thread inside the constructor method, just to see if that works. I think it will. Now the thread is for this panel. So this is how to set up this is how to initialize your game thread. The game thread is going to be a thread for this game panel. Okay? Now, when we start the game, we're going to start the game thread. That's pretty much all I'm going to do in this method. That's all I'm going to do. It's a very simple method. I guess I could just do this in the constructor method. We'll leave it like it is at the moment, because this could get more complicated later on, and maybe it's better to have this as a separate method. Now, interestingly, when we start a game thread, which is of the thread class, and remember, if we want to use a thread, we need to implement runnable, and if we want to implement runnable, we're forced to implement the run method. That's because when we do this, Java automatically calls the run method. We don't need to call it. When we start a thread, the run method is called. So what do we want to do when the run method is called? We want to start the game loop. So let's do it like this. While our game thread isn't null, we want to run the game. Okay? So to test if this works, let's do this. Game thread is running. Okay. So when we construct a game panel, we initialize our Marios. I'm just calling a function called start game. We jump into the start game function or method, and we start the game thread. When this happens, we jump into this run method automatically. We don't need to call it. This calls it automatically. And let's just see if we're in a game loop. Yes, it works. Okay, see if you can get this going.